ancestry and history is calling me. Come on, let's see. Hey, just how it used to be. Hey, come along with me. Let your spirit run free along the old Black Nile. Good afternoon, Washington, D.C. This is Tony Browder with another edition of the Browder File. We have a very special program for you today. Our program is going to be focusing on the education of the Black child. It's the first in a series of programs we're going to do regarding teaching our history to our children, teaching our history to our people, and not relying on others to tell our story. Why is that? Because 9 times out of 10, when others tell our story, they'll tell it incorrectly, or they'll tell the parts of our story that they want to tell and leave out information that's important to us, that's critically important to our development, our maturation as a people. So we've got a very special guest who I'll be bringing on shortly, but I just want to advise everyone of the fact that we're living in a new world. We are now living in a new era. It's the return of 92. I refuse to call him by name. I will call him 92. 45 and 47 is 92. So that would be my reference for the current president of the United States of America, who is taking no prisoners. He's coming in, fulfilling his promise to make America white again. I mean, make America great again by making it white again, by rolling back advances that have made this nation the great nation that it is. So we're going to be up for some challenges, and I've got a number of guests who will be coming on over the course of the next few weeks to help us figure out a way through this madness without going mad ourselves. Next week, we're going to have psychologist Jeff Menzies talk about how we can psychologically prepare ourselves for this new onslaught that everybody's going to be dealing with in this country and around the world for the next 4 years. So I'm the type of person who doesn't like complaining about things. I'm action-oriented. And so it's all about developing strategies to ensure that you can survive, to ensure that you can thrive regardless of the circumstances, regardless as to who is running this country or who is creating wars in this world. And so it means that we have to be informed, we have to be educated, we have to be enlightened, and we have to be empowered. So we're going to be upping our ante over the course of the next few months, bringing you information and guests who I know from my own personal experiences can help us become better at living our lives. And so let me introduce my guest today. I have a very special guest today, and she's a dear friend, a retired educator, a force of nature. Her name is Debra Watkins. So Debra, can you come forward now?
Yeah,
unmute yourself.
I'm here, Mr. Browder.
How are you doing, Debra?
I'm fine. I'm sorry that my camera is not cooperating today.
Well, that's all right. We're on radio, so as long as people can hear your voice, I'll be happy, and I'm sure they will too. So listen, Debra, you were in the classroom teaching in San Jose, California for multiple decades, and then you formed a statewide educational organization, and then you formed a national education program, and you just retired, you just sunset that national program, ABEN, in December of last year. So I want to talk about your career as an educator, why you have invested so much of your time and energy in educating Black children specifically. And I want to get some suggestions from you as to what we can do as parents, as concerned tax-paying citizens, to ensure that our children and every children in every classroom throughout this country is properly educated. So tell us a little bit about what initiated your career in teaching and how that journey has been for you.
Well, to begin with, I started teaching in 1977. So that's just over 47 years ago. And I went to graduate school at Stanford University for my master's degree and my lifetime teaching credentials in English, French, and psychology. And I started teaching high school English. But I knew from the very beginning that it was important to not forget the Black children. I always tell people, don't forget the Black kids. Don't forget the Black kids.
And you started off teaching in San Jose, correct?
Yes, I started teaching in San Jose, about 20
Eh,
minutes from the Stanford campus.
Okay, and San Jose, for our listeners here in the DMV, San Jose has an African American population of about 5%.
Right,
Right. So there were not very many Black children in every classroom to begin with.
right.
Okay.
But what I'd like to share with people is that, because this is really important for today's generation of Black educators, I was fortunate enough to start teaching in a school district that already had a Black educators group. The Black educators group was called Black Educators of East Side, Bees. And so I was able to join a community of Black people who were committed to our children. And unfortunately, you don't find that in many districts. And this was, as you said, a very white county, and it was a very white district. But fortunately, there were some Black educators who came before me who had the vision of establishing an organization, again called Black Educators of East Side, to pay attention to our children so that our children would not fall through the cracks. This was 1977. So if we fast forward to 2025, that focus is even more critical. It's like 1,000 times more critical than it was even back in
Wait,
1977. And that
now,
sounds
why 1,000 times? I mean, hasn't life gotten better for Black folks since we had a Black president and we had so many Black
right.
politicians advocating for us? Why
That's
have
right.
things gotten worse?
Yes, yes, yes. Because as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said in the ISIS papers over 40 years ago, we have not seen what the demon can do until I don't call it white supremacy because that perpetuates the lie. So the what white domination can do until we attack them directly. And the reason why your new president, who will never be mine, decided to start with
So
the
you're
dis
gonna start some mess today. You're gonna give him to me, and I'm gonna give him away. I'm gonna flush him down the toilet, which is exactly where he needs to go. But
would
continue.
start with dismantling of DEI
Yeah.
throughout the federal government, right? I mean, that was like one of the first, one of the first executive orders that he issued, is because again, when after George Floyd, after the George Floyd murder, and millions of people worldwide protested, that very public lynching of that
Mhm.
Black man. And then, all of these foundations and companies decided, oh, we needed to, do something to remedy what you and I know has been the way America is for 400 years. So nothing has changed,
Mhm.
Anyway, the bottom line is that this is why it's more important now than ever to protect our children. I started, so first I started working with bees, and then after 5 years, bees became part of the Black Educators of Alum Rock School District, a neighboring school district. So bees and bears became the Santa Clara County Alliance of Black Educators. And I was a founding member of the Santa Clara County Alliance of Black Educators. And then I became the president in 1994 and was president of that organization for 7 years. And people were saying, you're doing very impactful work in Santa Clara County, which is the heart of Silicon Valley. What, our children are doing, they're not doing as well in other parts of the state of California. Well, not doing as well meant that at the time, 87% of the Black children in California were graduating from high school. And I was worried about that 13%.
Mhm.
Okay, so what's their future going to look like? And so we started the California Alliance of African American Educators in 2001. And for the next 12 years, we did a lot of impactful work on in the state of California. And then my JAGNA, Dr. Joyce King, decided that we needed to do some national work. And I said, it's difficult enough fighting your people on the state level. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fight them on the national level as well. But she kept showing me the data. She kept showing me the data. 35% of the children in Brooklyn were graduating from high school. 42% from the children in Chicago. I mean, the statistics were abominable,
Sure. Well, listen,
absolutely abominable.
let me stop you for 1 second. Can you share with our listeners who the brilliant Dr. Joyce King is? I'm going to have her as a guest on this show in the coming weeks. We've already spoken, but share with our listeners, or give our listeners a preview of who Dr. Joyce King is.
Dr. Joyce King is probably responsible for more Black educators earning their doctorates in education focused on the liberation of Black people. So you have to understand, you can earn a doctorate, but it isn't necessarily focused on the liberation of Black people. And Dr. King is unapologetically Black. She's always been Black. She always says that she escaped Stanford University's doctoral program clothed in her right mind, barely, but she has been a guiding force in my life. I always say that she's responsible, and she always says I blame her for the the work that I did on a national scale. But when you have somebody like Dr. Joyce King, guiding you, unapologetically focused on the liberation of Black children and our people, it's hard to go wrong. Because see, then all of the people who are brilliant that love Dr. King, they then come under the tent. Dr. King always talks about the big tent. And so I'm so excited that you're going to have her on the show in a few weeks, because she can really, really elaborate about, what has been done, what must be done for our children. So again, she was the wind beneath my wings. As you know, I'm a fundraiser, and so I was able to raise the money to sponsor a 2012 convening in your hometown of Chicago. There were about 200 conscious Black people who came together, and Dr. King had invited you to be one of our speakers. I'd never heard of a Tony Browder. Remember, I grew up in very white California, and we had nothing resembling, Black history back in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up in these white schools. And so I was able to meet you, and the rest is history. We were able to do a lot of great work together here in California, and we're going to continue that. I'll talk about that more. But anyway, that's sort of my background. Let me stop.
Mhm. Right. So listen, ABEN, a Black Education Network. Give us a little overview of that, the work that you did with ABEN, and some of the projects that were an outgrowth of ABEN.
Yes. So, a Black Education Network, again, with Dr. Joyce King and Dr. Iva Carruthers, who you should have on your show as well, as the wind beneath my wings helped me create this organization that is, again, just like the California Alliance of African American Educators was, unapologetically focused on Black children. We never apologize for our laser-like focus on Black children. And, one of the signature events of the California Alliance of African American Educators that was then continued under ABEN's umbrella were our summer institutes. And those were held in partnership with Stanford's Graduate School of Education. And from the beginning, I decided I wanted to elevate Black scholarship. So I only had Black scholars come and speak at the Institute. And we had these institutes over a period of 19 years. Well, actually more than 19 years. We had them because we took a 3-year, we took a 4-year hiatus after the first 10 years. But the people, you talked about program, the people who attended our institute, let me just run off the names of the people. The first year was by Dr. Bob Moses of the Algebra Project. The second year, it was Beverly Daniel Tatum, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? The third year was Dr. Gloria Latson Billings. The fourth year is Pedro Noguera. He's kind of lost his way, so I don't want to elevate him. The fifth year was Dr. Wade Nobles. The sixth year was Lisa Delpit, Other People's Children. The seventh year, we brought in Shiraki Holly, Dr. Shiraki Holly, because at the time he was running the highest performing school for Black children in Los Angeles Unified School District. And so we brought in Dr. Holly to show people what the pedagogy looked like when it was applied. Because we've been hearing from these theorists for the first 6 years. Now that we apply the theory, what does it look like? And what are the results? And always our children thrived in those settings that were culturally relevant. So he was our speaker. Then we had Dr. We brought back Dr. I'm drawing away. Oh, we brought back Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum for the 20th anniversary of her book. I was trying to get to that. We brought her back, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And then we had we also brought back Dr. Bob Moses because districts were still wringing their hands about how to teach algebra to Black kids when he wrote the blueprint. But because he's a Black man, nobody was interested in following his blueprint. And so Black children continue to languish in math when we have the blueprint, the Algebra Project. And if your listeners are not familiar with Bob Moses and his work, the Algebra Project, please, please, please get that book. Get that book. And then for our 10th anniversary, I wanted to culminate with Dr. Geneva Gay, who elaborated on Dr. Gloria Latson Billings' culturally relevant teaching work and created culturally relevant pedagogy, an entire pedagogical approach to teaching our children. So that was the first 10 years. I'm not going to go through the next 9. I'm just going to end by saying we had Dr. Malana Karanga as our culminating speaker for the institute that we held just this past June. And it was absolutely phenomenal. And everybody present was gifted an autographed copy of his authoritative book on Kwanzaa, in case your listeners are out there thinking he didn't create the holiday.
Oh, no, no, no. You're talking to folk here in WPFW, so they know. They know the history. But let me ask you now, as you've given us this rundown of the work that you've done, of the brilliant minds that you've brought to the Stanford Institute, summer after summer after summer, what has been the impact in the state of California, in the school systems, the school districts that you've been working with? Has it made a difference?
Yeah, it has. It has absolutely made a difference. The purpose of, and just ask Dr. Chika Akua, don't forget to bring him in too. It has absolutely made a difference in that the purpose of the institutes were to expose, people in very white California to these brilliant minds, brilliant people that they had never heard of. And so that was the whole purpose. It wasn't for us to get rich on it. No, it was for the districts to send teams of people, which they did. I mean, there are districts that actually changed the trajectory of their Black and Brown children as a result of hiring some of the people that we featured at the Institute. They've actually changed the academic trajectory. We know that we've saved a lot of lives of children culturally as a result of our practices being placed in these school districts. But let me be very clear. One institute once a year is not going to turn the tables. We need sustained and deeply committed work in these schools.
So how would one go about replicating the successes that you had in California for a couple of decades? What talking points can you give other educators listening to this program today? What are the suggestions can you give them for scholars that they should be reading and inviting to their districts, or what fundraising ideas or what challenges do you see that are confronting teachers, principals, school superintendents that we need to be aware of? And I know I'm piling on a bunch of questions, but I know you can answer them. What can parents do also to support the continued education of their children?
I'm so glad. I'm going to actually start with the last question about
Sure.
what parents can do, because that's a critically important question. Parents are the first educators, and one of the programs that I didn't mention. I mean, there are several programs that I didn't mention, but I do want to mention our award-winning STEM program. So, 23 years ago, I started a STEM program, again, unapologetically focused on Black children. And let me just say this, 23 years later, and well, even from the beginning, parent engagement was a non-negotiable. So parents have to stay engaged with the program. They can't drop their kids off in third grade and pick them up in 12th. We start with children as young as third grade, and we stay with them until they graduate from high school. It's almost like co-parenting, but we make sure that parents are very clear that they're still the drivers of what happens for their children. Well, let me tell you what happens when you put parents in the driver's seat and you give them the tools necessary to navigate racist school systems that were never designed for the success of their children. Let me tell you what happens. In the Green Scholars Program, which I did name after a Black scientist who helped paved the way for today's computers in the heart of white racist Silicon Valley. 100% of our students graduate from high school. 100% of our students enroll in college. 90% graduate in 4 years with their BA or BS degrees. And 70%, it used to be 60, 70% of those degrees are in STEM, which is more than 8 times the national
So
average.
about
So when you
how many students have gone through your program since its inception?
So we've had about 650 students go through, it's a small program. We've had about 650 students actually go through the program. Because remember, we start with the children in third grade and we stay with them until they graduate from high school. So it's a very long-term commitment on our part. But parent engagement, when people ask me, how do you get those kinds of successes? And I say parent engagement is a non-negotiable. They have to devote 40 hours a year to help us run the program. So when you ask me about what role parents can play in the success of their children, I love to hold up the Dr. Frank S. Green Scholars Program, and they can go to Green with an E on the end, scholars.org, to learn more about this award-winning program. 10 years ago, I spun it off as its own 501c3. And the woman that I gave it to run is the first Black woman to earn her PhD from Stanford in electrical engineering. And Dr. Ayodele Thomas earned that degree in 2005. And so both of her children went through the program. And that's how she found us, and that's how I found her. And she continues to be the executive director, and the program has grown. Its budget is over a $500,000 annually, and they're thriving. They're absolutely thriving. So parent engagement is a non-negotiable. And your your listeners who might be interested in learning more about how the Green Scholars Program operates, again, they can just go to the website, greenscholars.org, and reach out to the leadership.
All right. Well, you're listening to Debra Watkins, educator from Northern California, who's had an impact on educators and children throughout the entire state of California and the United States of America. This is Tony Browder. You're listening to the Browder File Show. This is the first in a series of programs we're going to be doing on the education of the Black child. So getting back to educating our children, how important is it to incorporate their parents in the educational process as well. You're not running a babysitting service with the Green Scholars Program, so there has to be parent engagement. But have you found yourself in the process of raising the literacy, the history and cultural values of your students? Have you found yourself having to create some programs or some activities for the parents to get them more engaged?
Oh, yeah, parent enrichment. Oh, parent enrichment is part of the Green Scholars Model. So that's what I was saying. We teach the parents how to navigate school systems that were never designed for the success of their children, no matter where they are. Some of these are in private school, most of them are in public schools, and we teach them how to navigate those hostile waters. Yes, absolutely.
What were some of the
We have
biggest
to
challenges you faced doing this work?
fundraising.
Okay.
You need money in order to be successful.
Right.
And if I were a billionaire, we'd be able to. If I were a Black billionaire, a Black conscious billionaire, I would say.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Let me
As
add that
specific
part.
as you can. Hmm.
Yes. Then I'd be able to fund some brilliant work across the country. When I started a Black Education Network and we decided to go national with, the work, scaling it up to what we had been doing in California, I was able to meet so many amazing, Black people across the country doing great work in our communities, but just not having the financial resources to sustain the work and almost killing themselves in the process. And I'm happy to report that I was able to raise millions of dollars during the course of the 23 years of running the California Alliance of African American Educators and a Black Education Network. And during that time, I probably gave away half of that money to other Black-led organizations that didn't, and also taught them. I like to teach them to fish.
Hmm.
And so I tell people today, no, I'm not for hire. I'm not interested in your viewership, or your listening, your listeners reaching out asking me if they can hire me to help them fundraise. But I must admit, one of the things I love the most, and what I will be doing in quote unquote, retirement is not in my DNA, so I don't really say that, but in quote unquote my semi-retirement phase is continuing to help some Black-led organizations build the capacity to successfully sustain their work. So I will do that. But yeah, fundraising was one of the greatest challenges. The other great challenge is Negroes. So running into Negroes who
We've had
don't
many conversations
understand
about Negroes, right?
to run to run into Negroes who don't understand the role that they're playing in the destruction of Black children,
Sure.
and just to help them see in a kind manner as best possible the harm that they're doing, and again just our children, they might expect people who don't look like them to be damaging, but they don't expect people who look like them to be damaging. So in some cases, it's even worse when it comes
Sure.
from our own people.
Sure.
So it's been a challenge trying to convince people, systems leaders, right? People that are leading systems in education across the country to do the right thing by our children. In
Mhm.
fact, some of the worst performing school districts are run by our people. Now, how blasphemous is that?
Hmm. Well, that's the topic of an entirely different show. Uh, Educators who are failing our children, Black
Right.
educators who are failing our children. But I want to focus. I want to shift the focus a bit and talk about a book that you published last year, a book entitled "Soul Centered Approach to Educating Teachers."
Yes.
It was produced by ABEN, the Black Education Network, and it was edited by two friends here who attended University of Maryland, Rona Frederick and Kemet Shockley. And the foreword of this book was written by Joyce King. Can you share with us some of the highlights of this book. Well, first of all, why did you decide that a book like this needed to be written, and who were some of the people involved in the creation of this work?
I am so glad that you asked that question because people always ask me, well, people used to always say, you should write a book about how you created a bin, raised millions of dollars to sustain it for 23 years as an organization, from the California Alliance of African American Educators to the national organization. Uh, what are some of the things that you were able to do? What are some of the practices that you were able to highlight? Who are some of the people that you worked with during ABEN's existence, that are shining lights? They're bright stars around the best and the brightest people to do this work. And so, of course, because you and I have quite a productive, and I'll talk about CIP later, relationship, when you were coming out to California on a regular basis and then spreading the work around the nation. So of course, your chapter's in there. Dr. Akosua Lasane, brilliant Dr. Akosua Lasane, who coined the phrase the Black teaching tradition, um, and all that it stands for, all that it represents. She has a chapter about Ben's influence on her work, and how Ben's work really just is a shining light upon the work that she does. Monica Yutzi is in there as well. Monica is one of the Black homeschooling pioneers. And I never dreamed that at the end of my public school career, I would be such an advocate for Black homeschoolers. But I am an avid fan of the Black homeschooling movement. And if we could put all of our children in highly functioning Black homeschool settings, that would be my dream come true. I feel that our children are in harm's way, and it's only going to get worse under this new regime, unless we come together as a community, starting at the home, as you mentioned, and moving forward. Another person I had write a chapter is actually a brilliant young man who graduated from the Green Scholars Program himself, Ayinde Olatunti. And his work, he was in college, he was an undergrad, but he's a brilliant young man. And he has a chapter where he talks about the influence of the Green Scholars Program on his academic trajectory, and why he is so fiercely Black in his early 20s now. So those are some of the people who wrote the chapters. Oh, and of
Well,
course, Rona wrote.
Rona, and what
I have a
about
chapter in
Chika
there. Rona
Akua?
wrote a chapter.
What about Chika Akua?
I'm sorry, Chika Kua as well.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Chika is a brother. We will have him on our program in the future. Chika is a brother who is down at Clark Atlanta, a brilliant scholar, brilliant educator, does a lot of work teaching teachers, writing curriculum. Just a really down brother who loves Black people,
Yes.
loves teaching young folk. This whole idea of teachers loving the students, how important is that?
Well,
I
Asa
understand that
Hilliard, right?
I, yeah, go
One of
ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, one of Dr. Asa Hilliard's most oft quoted, quotes, talks about he's never met a child that didn't have some innate brilliance. And what
Mhm.
the child needed more than anything was love. And again, that's what it boils down to. You asked me for some other scholars. These are, so I did have Dr. Chris Emden. at the Summer Institute. Dr. Bettina Love talks about spirit murdering and how our children, their spirits are murdered in these school systems, and how we need to bring love back into the equation. I was just on a webinar with her and fabulous Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz. Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, another woman who is just infusing, the space and our children with the love that they need so that they can just grow and be amazing.
So I've heard a statistic that over 80% of the teachers in classrooms, middle school, elementary school, are young white women. Do you
Yes.
think that having our children sit at the feet of white teachers, having our black children sit at the feet of white teachers, do you think that they get a better education with white teachers as opposed to black teachers? What's been
Well,
your experience?
well, my experience is that Black teachers can do harm too. I
Okay,
mean, Black teachers
let's keep
can
it real.
definitely, just
Mhm.
because you're Black doesn't mean that you're going to be successful with Black children. Let me just say that one more time. Just because you're Black doesn't mean that you're going to be successful with Black children. Also, and Wakesa Matsumoyo always has me clarify this. But I used to tell my story of having only white teachers from K through 12. And as it turns out, those white teachers loved me. They loved me and they nurtured me, but then they traumatized my brother behind me. The same teachers, right? So I am not of the mind that only Black teachers can succeed with I'm not of that mind, because that hasn't even been my own experience. I've seen very successful white teachers teach Black students. I've seen
Mhm.
it with my own eyes. And so, properly trained, any teacher can do well with our children. But what I love about Sharif El-Mekki's work, I'm lifting him up here too, the Center for Black Educator Development. What I love about Sharif El-Mekki's work is that his is focused on getting more Black teachers in the pipeline, because a lot of research has shown that when Black children have even one Black teacher, don't have two or three, but even if they have one Black teacher in their K through 12 education, their chances of graduating from middle school are greater. If they have two, their chances of graduating from high school are better. This is data. This is research
Mm.
that has been done on thousands of Black children. So we understand the value, but again, they have to be conscious Black educators. They can't be, you know, uh, the
So
other.
define for me what you mean by a conscious black teacher, someone who knows more than the ABCs and the basic rudiments of education. What is required for a black teacher or any teacher to be a good teacher of black students?
Yes, any teacher, any teacher must, absolutely must understand what culturally relevant teaching looks like and what culturally relevant pedagogy looks like.
Now, what define those terms?
Okay,
Yeah, define
so
those terms for me, please.
yeah, so Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings coined the phrase culturally relevant teaching probably 40 years ago or so. And basically, it's where we acknowledge the cultural underpinnings that every child brings to the classroom. See, what they're trying to do now in the whitewashing of curriculum is to strip it, strip it of all of the cultural relevance, all of the cultural, parts that make the curriculum rich. And they want us to go back to, the lies about, Columbus, who never set foot on North America, discovering America, right? And how can you discover a place that's already occupied by indigenous people? You know,
Sure.
just all the lies that are told, about our education. They and the quote unquote founding fathers, all of
Mm-hmm.
all of that. So culturally relevant is where we acknowledge the cultural reference that are brought to the classroom by the children, and we teach upon those. We build upon those cultural, what we call prior knowledge. Something, they don't come to us as empty vessels. They come to us with prior knowledge. They come to us with the culture of their home. And we want to elevate and love that culture rather than denigrate it. That's
This
what
is Tony
culture relevance.
Browder. This is the Browder File Show. We're listening to our guest, Master Educator Debra Watkins. And Deborah, I want to ask you, you spoke of culturally relevant education. And we do know that since the Black Studies movement of the mid to late 60s, that's when most of our brilliant scholars were in undergrad and they became chairs of Black Studies departments and they've trained thousands, literally thousands of people. All of that now is under attack. All of
Yes.
that now, the rug is being pulled out from under these programs. Some of the programs are being forced to shut down. They're being forced to omit any information that lifts up Black people at the emotional expense of white people. So, what do you think the response from the communities of tax-paying citizens should be in order to ensure that their children and every child in every classroom is properly educated about the history of America and all of the people who came to this country, who live in this country, who helped to build this nation? How do we deal with these issues that we're going to be confronted with now?
Well, first of all, remember, millions of us did not vote for number 92.
Mhm.
Millions of us did not vote for number 92, and millions of us are already in a vanguard position of resistance. Already, we even have funders that have come out and said they're going to redouble their funding to resistance. We're not going to allow fascism to overrun this country, and so. But what I say to, so that's a whole nother group of resistance. What I say to the Black community is that we should have never, ever abdicated our responsibility to educate our own. We should have never, that's something that should have always stayed deeply rooted in the Black community. And this is a good place for me to bring up the cultural imperative program, if you don't mind.
No, okay,
Um,
go ahead. We've got about 7 more minutes, so let's
right.
continue
So
that.
I want to bring this up because we had a model where I was able to bring you out to California once a month, and you visited 3 different high schools in California, and you taught the children, the high school students from the Browder File, and in a classroom setting at 3 different high schools. And this went on for 3 years. Oh, and you would come out on Thursday night and you would teach the parents what you were going to teach their children the next day. So again, remember with me, parent engagement is a non-negotiable. You must bring the parents along. You must bring them along. And we know we have parents who still talk about what an education they got as their children were being educated. So even though I stopped the model because I had some a little health scare. Fortunately, you were able, along with Atlantis, to replicate it, across the country until COVID struck. And I know on one of your other calls, probably when Atlantis comes on, you're going to talk more about the CIP. But I think it's very important to realize that you and I, and with Atlantis' help, we constructed that. We came up with that idea. You said it's imperative that our children are aware of their culture. So you said, I'm calling it the cultural imperative. First, it was the cultural imperative initiative when we were just in California. at 3 high schools. And then when we went abroad, when we went state national,
Yes.
it was the
Mhm.
cultural imperative program, because Atlantis came along and came up with this powerful curriculum that I'm so excited that you are going to release upon the world this spring. And you know what's beautiful about that, Mr. Browder, is that it's like what Dr. Karenga says about Kwanzaa. We didn't ask for permission.
Yeah.
We did not ask anybody for permission to start to see the the Cultural Imperative Initiative. We didn't ask anybody for permission to start the Cultural Imperative Program. And you in Atlantis are not asking for permission to spread it abroad. And we are going to do everything in our power to ensure that as many people as possible know about the CIP so that we can put up guardrails around our children in this era of tyranny.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing it up. I will have my daughter, Atlantis Browder, on to talk about the CIP. But let me just share this as well in terms of our partnership, our educational partnership. I was so pleased that when we were doing the CIP program in San Jose, I was so pleased that we were able to bring Brother Quayle Zakari,
Yes,
who was
yes,
in graduate school at Howard, to come
yes,
out and do a longitudinal study. Can you speak briefly about
yes.
the outcome of that longitudinal study on our program?
Absolutely, Dr. He was amazing. I call him Dr. Quayle, but he was amazing. He came out, he created an instrument to measure the impact of the Cultural Imperative Initiative on the psychological development of our children and their appreciation of their African ancestry, right? That was really important. And there was runaway evidence that what we were doing, exposing those young people just once a month for 1 hour, with you physically in front of them, that influence made a difference in their cultural outlook, how they saw themselves as children of African ancestry.
Well, let's just say not just the cultural outlook. It made a difference in their performance in the
Oh,
classroom.
yes,
Their
that
grades
too.
went up. It made a difference in their performance at home
That
and in the
too.
community. We have the data.
Yes, we do.
And I'm so pleased to say that Brother Quayle was able to get his master's and his PhD
Yes.
from doing this longitudinal study.
Thank
And
you for bringing
from
that
what
up.
he has shared with me, this was the first time that such a longitudinal study was done on the efficacy of immersing African American children in African American history and culture. So we know it's not just making them feel good; it is transforming them from the inside out. So look, we've got to shut this thing down. But I do want to invite you back as we continue these discussions about the education of Black children. I'm going to have Dr. King on in a couple of weeks. And so maybe at some point in the near future, I can have you, Dr. King, and maybe Atlantis on to talk about your work and to talk about things that we can continue to do in our homes and in our communities to ensure the education of our youth, as well as the parents who are responsible for caring for our youth. So Deborah, before I let you go, can you share some parting words within the next 30 seconds?
Yes, I want to say don't despair. Our ancestors have been here before. Don't give up. Our children are expecting us to put the guardrails up. Do your part.
Do your part. Put the guardrails up. Our guest today has been Debra Watkins, an educator, a master teacher, a master fundraiser, and someone who genuinely is concerned about the education of all children, particularly children of African descent. Debra, thank you so much. Your book is called A Soul-Centered Approach to Educating Teachers. And where is it available? Where can people pick up your book?
Amazon.
Amazon. Okay, well, Jeff
Amazon.
Bezos. All right. Well,
I know.
all
Well,
right.
no, you don't have to go through Jeff Bezos. Actually, you don't have to go through Amazon. It's also Meyer Press. Meyer, Meyer Press. Go to Myers Press instead of Amazon.
All right, thank you so much for that. Deborah, look, thank you so much. I'll be in touch with you about coming back and expanding this topic. I appreciate you so much. You take care and be safe in Northern California. All right.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Browder. It has been a pleasure. It is always a privilege to work in concert with you. So thank
All
you for
right.
having me.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. So this has been another edition of the Browder File. I'm Tony Browder. It's my pleasure to enlighten you, to inspire you, to bring to my audience here on WPFW voices that are important to me, that I know and want to be important to you. So we're going to be doing a lot on education. Black History Month is right around the corner. We've got some special programs that we're working on, some special material that we'll be sharing with you. As Debra said, don't despair. We've been here before. And we have ancestors who have showed us how to overcome adversity. I end this show every week with Earth, Wind, and Fire, Maurice White, my homeboy from Chicago via Memphis, who always talked about the power of love. And this week, as we celebrated the anniversary of the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. King talked about love, but it's not just the type of love that you see on television. It's love of self. It's love of culture. It's love of family. It's love of community. And when you love that deeply about people that matter to you, about institutions that matter to you, you will find the strength to fight anybody or any system that attempts to dismember your power. We're in the fight for our lives, sisters and brothers. We have to be more vigilant than we ever have been before. We have to begin to appreciate ourselves more than we ever have before, love ourselves more than we ever have before. And only by doing that and being grounded in who we are as the first people, creators of the first culture and civilization, people who help make America. That's part of our legacy, and we're not going to give that up. We're not going to let anybody suppress our efforts to tell the truth about the role that we've played in creating this country and maintaining its sanity. America would be insane were it not for what Black people have done over the past century. So we're not going to let one president, one individual, one institution, one administration stop us from doing what we come here to do. In the words of Dr. Francis Wilson, who we talked about last week, everyone was born with a cosmic assignment. Find what your purpose for living is and live the rest of your life being true to that purpose. This is Tony Browder. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you next week with our special guests, Brother Jeff Lindsay. Peace.
Birds. And if there ain't no beauty, you gotta make some beauty. Have mercy.
Okay, that's it. Let's stop the recording.